Alright folks, hello and welcome back to Downstage Gaming. I'm your host Josh, and this is part 12 of our Let's Play of Head as Code. And I made a note of this last time when I got my first ending, I guess that was 2 episodes ago. The little people here are flickering, and I can't tell if I'm going insane, because I saw this title screen quite a lot, because I would come into it at the beginning of each episode, and it always shows a random person from our cast. I don't remember the flickering. I think that's new. I don't know what what importance that could have. But when we last left off, we had started going down some new routes here. We got a bad end in which we brought some pizza justice to Agnos, and then we found what I'm assuming is probably one of the main locks here, which is basically Simon and E go back to that mysterious locked room with the remote, and they're gonna open it. But they don't have everything they need in order to open it, so we need to get all the different letters for that password. So we'll come back to that. The next spot that we're going back to then here is after Simon and Jasmine come back from their little sexual innuendo time in the lab. Jasmine gets real weird, and then we decide to go with A. So I'm curious to see what the choice is gonna be here. Let's take a look. Had something I wanted to talk to Jasmine about, but before I could say anything, the train arrives. Okay, so we've been here. Okay, so this is okay. So right now this is us just coming back from the lab. We talked with E last time. I'm curious what will happen if we talk to Agnos here. Have you two found anything worthwhile? Almost right as I approached him, he inquired about our findings. Perhaps he was very interested in leaving this place, and I couldn't fault him. No, not particularly. It was really strange, though. It was a science room or something like that. I'm not super good with any of that stuff, so I couldn't say exactly what it was used for. Yeah, this is the main thing that I was curious about, because last time we talked with E, we, told E stuff, and Jasmine was trying real hard to tell A absolutely nothing. I was about to say something else, but Jasmine, who overheard our conversation, glared at me. I slowed down and stopped talking. Was she trying to tell me not to mention the heavy door to him? I hoped he didn't notice how awkward the end of my discoveries was. He stroked his little beard over the thought I gave him to ponder. His tiny, pointy beard. Interesting. A laboratory. I'm sure you realize that we may not be in the metro anymore by now, correct? Or perhaps better said would be that Smiley has done quite a number, a little dance number. It's got a lot of very intricate moves to it. We are imprisoned in a strange place of his making. To what ends, I cannot say, but it's undeniable that there is something he wants us to see or find. I nodded a little. Was it the secret laboratory, then? I couldn't tell. The old man did have a point, though. The purpose behind making that laboratory available to us was nebulous at best. Train stopped at the station within the next half minute. Alright, so are we back to things we've seen here? Yeah. Okay, so we have this same conversation with Jasmine, and then we come out because we want to take a walk. So what has just happened here? Yeah, so I think this might be us choosing whether to go with A or not. Scratch the side of my head and indecision. Yeah, interesting. Alright, well, let's stick around. See what happens. Faced with the choice between heading out with this stranger alone and remaining at the lounge, I chose to stay. Well, couldn't we have a stroll here then? If we have to decide our next team soon, we might be better off remaining here. Plus, it might help you not to have quite so evil a turn this time. But probably not. I did try to disguise my lack of trust by a sensible suggestion, but I could sense that he wasn't buying it. This old man generally acted in our best interest, did he now? However, part of me believed that was a lie. Normally I'd have gone with him, but that little voice was too loud for me to ignore. If I went with him, I thought, I'd get roped into something I couldn't come back from. Certainly right about that. I suppose that could work then. Very well, let us take a walk around the lounge. We came back up the stairs. I paid little attention to everyone else. I had to figure out a way to get him to stop following me. Perhaps it would have been simpler to bring him to the others. If we were surrounded by them, he probably wouldn't ask me about whatever it was he planned to do. However, doing that would also potentially put Jasmine in peril. If it had anything to do with the station we just explored, I should have counted myself lucky he went for me and not her. Then again, I didn't really know why I believed what he wanted to ask me was about the stuff we saw at the station. It was a little odd. For some reason, I just knew. I also knew going there would lead us to unsavory events. Nothing good could come out of that outcome. I decided it was better to try and pass some time doing useless stuff. It's generally the right decision to make. If I looked around for long enough while acting clueless, maybe he'd get bored and decide to move on. Alright, well let's look at things then. That clock was frozen. The hands didn't move. It was always happy hour somewhere, though I guess this isn't really what people call happy hour. I could barely reach the gemstones embedded in the wood. Ooh, yeah, sell those for a pretty penny. Who put a clock that high on the wall? Maybe it was to dissuade us from messing with it? Why would Smiley care? If one wished to go to the other side of the counter, they had to lift this piece of wood. Alternatively, someone could just crouch and slip through. It wasn't very effective deterrent against people who wanted to slip in. However, its name eluded me. I'm sure this thing had a name. Hey, do you know what this part is called? This is the, this is... Whew, give me a second. He too was at a loss when confronted with the name of this thing. This is the counter lift thingamajig, yes. So you don't know what it's called, I see. No, I know what it's called. Yeah, I just can't remember. He didn't know then. Wait, I recall. It's a flip-up counter. Ah, crud. He did know. Close by were a few mugs and drink dispensers. I tried to turn on the tap, but it just made a strange noise and nothing else happened. For all the luxury this place offered at first glance, a lot of things shouldn't work or outright broken here. I mean, it's really just rude. Like, if we're gonna have to come back here, you know, after every room or whatever, at least give us something, Smiley. I wondered why these seats never had anything to lean back against. I knew this was what a stool was, but why was there no back? Was it because drunks who stayed up late leaned forward under the counter? That really couldn't be good on their backs. It's a decent question. I could have sat there, but I also could have not, and I chose not to. I wasn't going to sit there. Sitting there was like admitting defeat. No chance in hell. Maybe a little bit of sitting couldn't hurt. I hopped onto the seat. Ah! Bad end. As I sat onto the stool, I realized somehow I'd been had. There was a whoopee cushion. I didn't know how, and I didn't know to which entity, but I felt like I lost the game. To me. You lost to me, Simon. The surface of the counter was well cleaned. In fact, it was almost shiny. I looked over at A, who noticed my observation of the surface. It looks good, doesn't it? I cleaned it up earlier. You think you wanna give me a compliment about it? It's nice and shiny, eh? I even made sure it had a nice lavender fragrance with one of the products from under the counter. Leaning forward, he sniffed the countertop a little. I could tell the scent was fairly light in the air, even when I was about half a meter away from it. Yeah, I guess so. The lamps were giving off an eerie light. I didn't mess with them, and looking straight at the bulb was like looking directly at the sun. Not fun, and it hurt my eyes. There were a lot of bottles laid out in the open. It was almost scary how many kinds there were. I recognized a few well-known brands, and then there were others, like Barncastel wine. Sure, I'm not saying that right. What did Barncastel even mean, anyway? Was it a location? All of those are alcoholic, right? You're far too young. Oh, wait. Sorry, that was your line. Are you making fun of me? Indeed. That's why I didn't mess with them. Most of us can drink them here, of course, but I think we must remain level-headed if we want to make it out of here. He glared over at Ray. Specifically, the ones A had taken in order to mix our cocktails had been under this counter. Perhaps those would be worth investigating. If I did so, however, I would certainly not get to explore more. Had I wasted enough time to get him off my trail? I wasn't sure. Judging by how he kept following me, I thought that perhaps this was a waste of time for me, too. Perhaps he wouldn't go away. Thinking about it, this meant continuing on wouldn't be an issue, as it would be inevitable that he'd keep tailing me anyway. Well, yeah, I mean, let's look at it. Lifting up the countertop piece that allowed us to move behind the counter, I went there, followed by A, as always. I examined the bottles more closely, then squatted down to look at some bolted metallic cupboards. You won't get to open those. I tried. That's how I knew they were refrigerated. If you put your hands against the surface, you'll feel it. I did as much, and sure enough, the surface was cold. Wait, touching metal that was cold was a very bad idea. The skin could get stuck due to the ambient heat and have a real Christmas Story moment. I pulled away from it. Oh yeah, you need to have it wet so it froze and stuck there like a tongue. Or maybe not. I didn't know how it worked. The bolts are too big for us to open. We need some serious handy tools for this. Was there anything else you wish to take a look at then? He diverted the topic. I was fine with this. The twins still hadn't arrived, so I needed to buy a bit more time. Took a glance under the counter next. Ah, yes, the other drinks. There are many, aren't there? I actually looked at all of them earlier, none of them seem to be alcoholic down there. Why would you have a bar but have nothing alcoholic? Well, if you wanted to have alcoholic drinks, there are some on the counter. However, I wouldn't trust them. They've been kept out of a fridge for what looks like months, perhaps. It's possible the fridges below are there just for show, and this is all there is. I opened the little cupboards under the counter, the ones that weren't bolted shut. These enclosed boxes were refrigerated, too. But no matter which one I opened, they all contained drinks for kids. I mean, it's not for kids just because it's non-alcoholic, Simon. One could argue stuff like soda wasn't for kids, and I'd be in agreement. Alright, you know, a lot of times in this game, I seem to make comments and then immediately read the next sentence and find that my thoughts are being given credence. What surprised me was the assortment of drinks. It didn't make any sense. Grape drinks over there, orange drinks over here, and best of all, there was some honeyed stuff or something. Couldn't read the labels. A lot of them were foreign languages. I could only guess what they were about based on the pictures, if there were any. So how did Smiley get all this anyway? Was he rich? I figured some of the drinks here were actually much older than I was. The fact was confirmed momentarily when A spoke again. None of those doors were locked up, surprisingly enough. And what's more interesting, all of these bottles might not be alcoholic, but they are fairly old. Not quite as old as me, but still, I believe they may be I believe they may be older than I am. Which is strange, because normally you'd be worried over expiration dates, yes? I was about to reply and agree, but when I took a look at him, he seemed even whiter than usual. Why? His skin was pale as if he'd realized something. Wait, what does this mean? Unfortunately for me, I wouldn't learn what he'd just thought about. As if the devil himself had chosen this moment to ruin everything, a scream pulled me out of my contemplation. What could he be? Like, is he making the realization that because he's the oldest person here, and that the stuff that's here is older than even him, that it couldn't be that Smiley couldn't be any of us? That doesn't make sense, though. A young person could get an old drink. That's not impossible. I don't know. Perhaps what he was looking at was what made him feel such fear. The old man was already observing the situation from above the counter. I rose up too, and the sight came grim and strange. Whoa! Whoa! I was not expecting this! There was one of the twins on the ground with a knife lodged into her chest. I couldn't tell if this was G or H. Next to the immobile body was Jasmine on the ground, straddled by the other twin. Whichever this one was, she was wailing against the pink-haired girl, screaming and tearing up a storm. Something was weird. I felt strangely detached from the scene, despite someone having died. It was like this didn't make sense. The twins hadn't come back yet. How were they here? I'd have known if they'd come back. I was waiting for it to happen. Come to think of it, where was Ray? He wasn't there. Ray and Marco weren't there, in fact. The entire room was moving. Did A, like, drug those drinks he gave us way back when? As I watched everything in slow motion, a splitting headache ran through my head. It was freezing me on the spot. Where was Marco? Where was Ray? Why were the twins here? In the span of a single moment, I realized that they had been here for a while. Somehow my memory of Marco and Ray being here was false. Huh. So this is probably some timeline shenanigans stuff, right? The twins had returned first instead. You killed my sister! Why? Why did you... Why? Why? Why do you keep saying she's an imposter? This isn't Among Us, you idiot! My sister isn't an imposter! H isn't an imposter! I finally put together that this twin was G. H was an imposter? What was Jasmine saying? A was on the move too, but whatever he did, I didn't know as I sank back under the counter. Please, don't fight here. We have to sort out the situation, no matter how dire. Let go of me! She assassinated her! I was holding my head in pain as the others tried to handle the situation. Something in me was wrong. I was still fixated on that strange moment when Ray and Marco were replaced by the twins. Gah! What the fuck is this? I finally forced myself up. I had to do something. I ran around the counter to do something. Anything. And for that matter, where did Jasmine even get this knife? She took it. Remember? There's that moment, I don't remember when this was, but there's some moment we went back to the lab and we noticed that a knife was gone at that point. So Jasmine took one with her while we were there. A small flashback enlightened me. Right, she disappeared when we went to the laboratory, didn't she? Did she grab the knife back then? Why? Was it for this? Had she planned to kill H already? As I moved in, I saw the situation. The old man was holding G under both her arms, but he was having issues keeping her off the warpath, and Jasmine was still on the floor, trying to stand up. If I did nothing, the hostilities would begin anew. I moved forward and tried to grab my friend to stop her from fighting the twin. Yet, as I reached for her, Jasmine dodged my hand and instead elbowed me in the face. Yeah, get me, Jasmine. Ow, Jasmine! Considering the situation, I didn't care about the nicknames anymore. Jasmine slipped out of my grasp to grab the knife, and in the same movement, G kicked A in the knee, making him lose his footing just long enough for her to sprint out of his hold. Jasmine deflected the girl running at her with her free hand, and the next scene was something even weirder than before. I was even more detached from this one. Sure, this dealt with my issue, but... Jasmine stabbed the old man in cold blood. All he let out was a weak noise before collapsing to the ground. Some bloody red typhoon was rapidly rushing out of his body. The imposters! All of them will get it! Every imposter here has got to die! Jasmine had stabbed him in an important place, since he seemed to have gone into shock. An important place, huh? I hear ya. Moments later, I thought for sure that he had expired. All the color remaining in his face was draining away. His breathing had already ceased the moment she stabbed him. Perhaps she'd gotten him in his lung. I wasn't sure exactly what this meant. His entire body was softening up, and he dropped down like a marionette without his strings. As I watched, powerless, G's cry was mixed with the noise of the body falling to the ground. Just like the expiration dates of the drinks, his own had come. Jasmine, stop! Why him? What are you... I stopped talking when I saw her pull the knife out from the old man's body. Her gaze was unfocused. It was all over the place. Her eyes were always open and never even blinked anymore. I thought I imagined it, but I definitely saw her irises wiggling slightly. That's weird. They were vibrating back and forth once in a while. What happened to you, Jasmine? My inertia ended the moment she turned her head away from the old man to look elsewhere. Where? Nearby, E was standing up. Come on! She clearly felt something was amiss. However, she also couldn't tell what exactly was happening, and Jasmine had her sights on her. Despite all that Jasmine was doing, I couldn't bring myself to hate her. I didn't know what was happening to her. Yeah, I mean, clearly this is not her in her best state of mind here. It was like a demon possessed her. I just needed to destroy that demon. If I destroyed that demon, Jasmine would come back to me. Her eyes, I could tell they weren't fine. She wasn't fine, and I needed to free her from that demon. In the split moment of my choice, I saw two things. One, G was utterly useless. She was horrified. In her state, she was much more focused on her twin's dead body. Two, Jasmine was lunging forward. I only had a single moment to act. I could either slam Jasmine to knock her out cold, or pull E out of her trajectory. I was about midway between both. This small hesitation was because I didn't know if I'd hurt Jasmine doing it. At the same time, I couldn't stand by idly while E was in danger. Huh. I mean, I think this is the better choice. I mean, you tackle her and things could go real bad in all kinds of different ways. A lot of people could get hurt. Although it probably is good to get the weapon away from her, too. Because this doesn't actually solve the problem, it just stops her from getting... Yeah, you know what? Let's tackle her. Let's tackle her. I chose to knock Jasmine away with a powerful slam on my shoulder. She was instantly knocked out when she collided against the wall. Perhaps I'd gone a little too hard. It hurts to do this to my friend, but I had no choice. It was either knocking her out or risking her damaging someone else. Or even herself, even more than a simple knockout. Something in her caused her to go out of her mind. At last, she dropped the knife on the way down as she crumbled to the floor in a heap of Jasmine. The weapon was covered with a red, drying bloodbath. I panted heavily, calming down after that altercation. It had drawn a lot out of me just to do this much. Meanwhile, G was still watching, unable to move. It was perhaps a better way to say she was no longer willing to move. She was still frozen, in shock, simply put. This whole business, it's... What's even happened? I don't know. But we have to treat her. We need to bring her back. Bring her back? She looked at me, strangely bewildered. I spoke about Jasmine, but perhaps she misinterpreted it. I corrected myself to not give her false hopes. I mean, we have to restrain Jay, so that way she won't hurt us. She killed my sister. That's all I want. I want my sister back. She clenched her teeth. The sadness in her voice was impossible to mistake. I approached her to console her, but she glared at me. Don't come closer! She stood up and hesitated before grabbing her sister's body and carrying it off. I watched it all happen, unable and unwilling to get in the middle of them. I waited a few minutes, though I knew I didn't have all the time in the world. Yeah, I'm just gonna take a moment to pause here and think. I mean, Jasmine was definitely acting weird by the time we had gotten back. And I don't think it's realistic to say this is just some, like, mental breakdown, right? Like, somebody did something here. That's the only thing that makes sense. Unless there's some, like, supernatural thing going on here that I'm unfamiliar with. Those seem like the two plausible reasons for why she's done this, though. I waited a few minutes, though I knew I didn't have all the time in the world. Jasmine was knocked out, but she'd come awake sooner or later. I took a look at her body. No, not like that. Come on, reader. Just a cursory one. Stop being a pervert. Making sure she was still alive was a priority. She was not bleeding anywhere, but the hit she got was definitely strong. Looking around for anything to help me, I noticed that when G carried H's body away, she left something behind. The other twin once carried a map on her, and now it was on the floor. I found it strange that G didn't come back for it, but I wasn't going to complain. I took it and looked it over. There were the names of every station and a map of all of them, separately, in a pile. One of them was an infirmary. Ah, I can use this to keep Jasmine bound and treat her if needed. Didn't A say that he came back from the infirmary earlier? That means it's solved and vacant. I also had to take care of the knife. This kind of thing was too dangerous to keep lying around or to give to anyone. I need to get rid of it in a way that would make it impossible for anyone to get it anymore. First, I needed to clean it. I mean, is that really important? I loathe doing this, but I used A's body to do so. It felt like the right move. It felt like disrespecting this man was the right thing to do. I wiped it off with a piece of his clothing. Yeah, I didn't have any other way. This place surprisingly didn't have a sink, and the water cooler was just for show. It was empty. I had a passing thought for G while I was cleaning the knife. She was the only one, apart from Jasmine and me, who knew what transpired here. And she was on the loose! The twin would definitely be different the next time we met. Once she'd processed everything, it would change her. Something like that could break someone. Perhaps she was already broken. It was partially my fault. Okay, first order of business done. Now let's leave the knife somewhere no one will find it. In this potted plant. I put it in my outfit and lifted Jasmine from the ground to carry her down the stairs. I needed to take the train with her to head to the infirmary. Oof! She was heavy. Way heavier than I thought she'd be. Hopefully she never hears this. I wasn't someone who was especially fit, just average, and so carrying a body like hers slowed me down considerably. She could have eaten less strawberry cakes at least. I knew she loved it, but this was a bit much. You gotta be rude even in these kinds of moments, Simon. I made sure the twins weren't downstairs. You mean twin? Well, I guess she's carrying the other body. Alright, fine. Twins weren't downstairs before I stepped out of the little lobby. The train must have passed. I don't know which direction she took. Perhaps she went the same way. That wouldn't be good. I spoke aloud to organize my thoughts. I needed to find a place where no one would take the knife anymore. That's it. The rails. No one would cross them for it. Especially if I threw it into the darkness. No one could see it. That's such a good idea. It's literally the idea that I had when we first talked about hiding the knife. This is literally the idea that I had. Go back to that video, watch the part where Jasmine's talking about how they should hide the knives. I make a joke about throwing it into the rails. I'm a genius. That's what I'm saying, folks. I lowered Jasmine to the ground slowly. Then I went to the little dark hallway, and just before entering it, I looked into the tunnel. I couldn't see a thing beyond this room. Perfect. It was pitch black. I threw the knife, which echoed as it landed with loud clanks, and then nothing. It's gone now. No one will make use of it again. It was as if I spoke to reassure Jasmine, but she was still out cold. The train arrived momentarily. I painstakingly lifted Jasmine back up to enter the train with her. There was no one else around. Everything was eerily deserted. Eerily silent. Are we just leaving E? Or are we just like, hey, E, you just hang on here? I mean, I guess in this this timeline now, we don't have any way to communicate with her. Because A hasn't given us the paper. But still, seems kind of not great for her. What a mess. I set Jasmine in a seat. She looked like a disarticulated marionette. I made sure to position her in such a way as to have the momentum work with her posture. The train set off. I had to count the stations not to miss my stop, but I also wanted to think about the situation. So let's make sense of all this fuckery. Well, we're gonna have to make sense of all this fuckery next time. This is interesting. I'm very curious as to what exactly has occurred here with Jasmine and why it has occurred only to her. Because again, I was thinking like it's possible that A did some kind of quote-unquote fuckery with or drinks way back when, but then that would have affected all of us. And also, it doesn't really make a lot of sense because why would he care to make Jasmine crazy? Which makes you think that maybe it's something that Smiley is doing, but how? I don't know. Well, we'll have to make sense of all this fuckery next time. Until then, this has been Downstage Gaming. I have been your host, Josh, and I will catch you all next time.